Hello everyone and welcome to our first Energy and Infrastructure webinar, Delivering Sustainable Infrastructure in an Uncertain World. How do we hold our nerve? This is a great opportunity for you to hear from our industry-leading experts that are going to provide some great insight from our unique position in the energy and infrastructure sector. Just before we get going and before I introduce the panel, a little bit of housekeeping before we start. The webinar will run for approximately 45 minutes. The panelists are going to talk for around about 30 minutes, and then we will take some questions and answers. So if you do have questions, please use the Q&A function on your screen. Also, there'll be two polls throughout the webinar. One after I finish, just as I start the panelists into their discussion, and one at the end. It would be great if you can engage with those polls, please. So, just moving on to who we are. I'm Dean Purvis, Global Head of Infrastructure, and I'm going to chair this webinar. I'm also joined by a number of our leading experts. So I'm joined by James Garner, who's our Head of Insight and Analytics, who's joined by Nicola Herring, who is the author of our latest infrastructure market report. Michelle Regent joins us, who's our Head of ESG, and we have a couple of our sector experts, Paul Robinson, who leads our rail business, Nandi Ellis, who leads our energy business. The webinar is about sustainability is the key challenge across the energy and infrastructure sector at the moment, with a huge wave of investment being channeled into these sectors. We have a fantastic opportunity to deliver these programs in a way that will benefit generations to come. But counteracting forces could get in the way of that, and things like a change in the energy mix, recovery from the pandemic, and material and labour shortages caused by the global pandemic and political change could give people the excuse to actually deliver some of these programs in a less sustainable way, and we can't let this happen. So there are three main issues to tackle in delivering sustainable infrastructure and energy that will provide the sustainable outcome that we need. And investment in infrastructure is needed, and it's great that we've got that, but we do need to respond to the climate crisis. We need to meet COP26 commitments. We need to think about how we support the social and economic recovery. You know, how do we build sustainable communities off the back of this? You know, material and labour shortages will cause cost escalation. How do we counteract that? And the ultimate thing here is that if we've got this crest of a wave, how do we make the outcomes and the projects and programs affordable, practical, and deliverable? And what that means is that we need that level of government investment to be committed, so that it gives us absolutely the visibility that we need, so that we can plan and invest and deal with some of these economic threats. You know, the long-term and integrated approach to these investments will be helped with things like data and digital, intelligent procurement, and this will provide some of the design outcomes and benefits of the schemes that we're looking for, and we'll make sure that we are able to better deliver these schemes efficiently and sustainably. So I'm going to hand over to our experts now to discuss in more detail. We've just done poll one, so thank you for responding to that. And I'm now going to hand over to Michelle Regent.
Thanks, Dean, and good morning to you all. So to provide some context around the COP26 commitments that we referred to in the last slide, COP is, of course, the Conference of Parties, the UN Climate Change Conference. And we can all see the effects of climate change are intensifying, with storms and floods and wildfires occurring with greater frequency. COP21 was held in Paris back in 2015, and this was momentous really, because every country that was participating agreed to limit global warming to below 2 degrees and really aiming for 1.5 degrees. And this next decade is critical if we are going to achieve this aim of 1.5 degrees. And in fact, the projections already show that 1.5 degrees is considered very likely to be reached in the early 2030s. So there really is no time to lose. At COP21, the participating countries agreed that every 5 years they would come back with an updated plan to reflect their highest possible ambition for reducing their emissions. And so COP26 in Glasgow this November is that time for countries to update their plans, and with over 190 world leaders expected to participate, we wait to see how these ambitions are going to turn into action. So as well as the country's emissions plans, known as their nationally determined contributions, what else will COP26 focus on? Well, it will be bringing together governments, business and civil society to progress several themes. And the first of these is adaptation and resilience. This is all about helping communities adapt to and prepare for the worst impacts of climate change. Then we have nature-based solutions to safeguard and restore natural habitats and the ecosystems to preserve biodiversity. Energy transitions will accelerate clean energy uptake by encouraging the use of cheaper renewables and storage. And clean transport to speed up the global transition to zero-emission vehicles. And lastly, finance, which is all about encouraging cleaner financial systems to unlock green jobs and growth. So what does this mean for infrastructure investment? Well, infrastructure is a big deal because it's what connects people and places. So it's the very foundation for economic activity. And when done well, it helps build sustainable communities. But it also has to be more than that now, because as countries plan their recovery from the pandemic, they have to tackle climate change at the same time. So there's a very good reason for this, because over 80% of the UK's current emissions come from the infrastructure sectors. So those that include power, heat, heavy industry, transport networks, etc. So if we do this right, then these infrastructure investments and projects will not only help us transition to net zero, but also help communities to adapt to and prepare for the effects of future climate change. And on that note, just last year, the government launched its 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, and it identified opportunities presented by shifting to net zero, including leveraging public and private investment across technologies such as hydrogen, offshore wind, nuclear, electric vehicles, heat, and buildings. So if we put aside the obvious benefits for the environment for just 1 second, there are lots of other positive outcomes from pursuing sustainable infrastructure, like improving health and skills and education through investment in technology and buildings. And that all aligns to one of the government's key policies, which is to level up the UK, improving quality of life for people so that they don't feel that they need to leave their local community in the first place to fulfil their potential. And if we're going to get there, we need more investment in the roads, in rail, in technology that all help to better connect people, because this in turn will promote growth and investment in new areas, so leading to job creation and increased productivity. And looking just further afield for a moment, at Gleeds, we're currently working on the reconstruction of Peru in the aftermath of the El Nino disaster. So this really is a perfect example of the link between adaptation and mitigation strategies, nature-based solutions to fight climate change, whilst at the same time building better outcomes for people and their livelihoods. So I'm now going to hand over to Nicola, who will talk about how infrastructure supports social and economic recovery and the challenges that we face in this area.
Great, thanks Michelle, and good morning everyone. I'm now going to look at why infrastructure investment is so important. So it's clear that the COVID-19 pandemic has decimated economies around the world and has had huge societal impact as well. Governments are now looking for policies to stimulate growth and recovery, and many are turning to infrastructure investment as a tried and tested method for instigating recovery from an economic shock. The International Monetary Fund has called for governments to capitalise on the low interest rate environment to boost infrastructure spending. In its Fiscal Monitor report, which it published in October 2020, it showed that by emerging and advanced market economies investing 1% of GDP, It could create growth of 2.7% and create millions of jobs. The IMF set out 4 steps for government's planning infrastructure investment, and the UK government has broadly followed these. In June 2020, they announced £5 billion worth of investment for shovel-ready maintenance, repairs and upgrade projects. And these were intended to generate sort of quick stimulus. At the same time, they announced the Infrastructure Delivery Task Force, which is called Project Speed. Their remit is to review public investment projects to see if there are any opportunities to make them more efficient, so therefore bringing the benefits sooner and maximising the outcomes. Massive funding was announced via the National Infrastructure Strategy and in the spring budget to build back better. Whilst it's clear that investment is needed to meet net zero carbon targets and also to support social and economic recovery, there's concern about the impact of the pandemic on the wider economy due to the significant level of support that the government have needed to offer businesses and individuals. As you can see on the slide, general government gross deficit as a percentage of GDP reached 12.2% in the 2020 calendar year. Whilst this was higher than the EU 27 average, it was actually 1% less than the average of the G7 economies. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that the EU and G7 economies are all investing in infrastructure to help support the transition to net zero carbon and also economic recovery. Another challenge is materials and labour causing cost escalation. And you can see on the slide data from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. There's been significant price increases in the year to July 2021. And in fact, their all work material price index has increased by 20.1% in the year. And particularly significant is the increase to steel, which is over 60%. Infrastructure projects are particularly exposed to this volatility in materials pricing due to the key components of projects, so steel, concrete, reinforcement, aggregates, etc. There are also issues with extended delivery times. This is partly due to shipping issues, but also the significant shortage of heavy goods vehicle drivers. And as you'll have seen from the press, this isn't only impacting construction, but there's regular news stories now of, blood test shortages, food shortages, all kinds of things. Labour availability and skills shortages remain a problem across the construction industry. And recent ONS data shows that there were 38,000 vacancies between May and July, which was the highest level in 20 years. Skill shortages are straining the infrastructure sector as clients, consultants and delivery partners are all hiring for large programmes at the same time with the uptick in pipeline. I'll now hand over to James, who will talk about some of the solutions to these challenges to help meet the need for sustainable infrastructure.
Thanks, Nicola, and morning everybody. I apologise for my slightly croaky voice this morning. So let's consider some of the solutions to these challenges. To build the right facilities in the first place, we'll need to use data properly. Above all, we need to reduce costs, programme and disruption, whilst at the same time improving performance and safety. So if we're going to do that, integrating new technologies will undoubtedly play a big role, although it's well worth noting that many of these technologies are currently in their infancy and will start improving exponentially over the next decade or so. So let's look at a few examples. As you can see there on the slides, data and analytics is the first one. Data analytics can be used in the collection of project information like cost and programme, or to track project delivery and budget in real time, which ultimately helps ensure more realistic outcomes and robust budgets. Then you have artificial intelligence, otherwise known as AI, and machine learning, which is a bit of a buzzword at the moment in the industry, but what does it actually mean for us? Well, for one thing, machine learning can help us identify and reduce clashes between different models, or to find more optimal design solutions. A good example is generative design, which is becoming more valuable as the technology evolves. It also helps to prioritize issues and highlight key risks before they become a big issue. It can even be used to make project delivery more efficient through using robots and sensors to capture information and data for analysis, that can highlight the risks and the labour opportunities and so forth. Then we also have 3D printing. So 3D printing can significantly reduce waste and improve efficiency. HS2's London Tunnels contractor is actually using robots to print concrete so structures can be built on site and then assembled by cranes. This is hugely beneficial because it's estimated to reduce the amount of concrete used and carbon emission by up to 50%. And those reductions could get even greater with robotics and fewer deliveries. And then lastly, we have digital twins. What's a digital twin? Well, it's a realistic virtual representation of something physical. It uses sensors, which produces data about the physical object's performance. And with that data, the virtual model can then run simulations, study performance, and generate improvements for the physical object. The Centre for Digital Built Britain is running the National Digital Twin Programme, which is an ecosystem of connected twins that is estimated could generate about £7 billion of cost savings per year. So looking at the bigger picture, we know digital data-driven solutions will go a long way to solving many of the problems, but they cannot exist in isolation. For example, better outcomes can be achieved for infrastructure projects through a long-term and integrated approach to investment being taken. Secondly, certainty and visibility of pipeline will allow the infrastructure sector to plan ahead and invest in skills and innovation. We not only need intelligent procurement, we have to ditch the lowest cost mindset. That's the only way we're going to truly incentivize innovation and make construction more sustainable. Traditionally, risk has been passed through the supply chain, but this is ineffective and can raise costs due to a risk premium being applied. It's long been discussed and widely thought that aligning all partners in a project to a positive outcome can reduce premium. There is also the opportunity to link risk and reward through a mechanism, such as the pay and gain mechanism, where the benefits and savings to the target cost are split between the parties, mainly the employer and the contractor, and this encourages innovation and best performance. I'll now hand over to Andy, who will take you through what's happening in the energy sector.
Thank you, James, and good morning, folks. I'm Andy Ellis, and I head up the energy business at Gleeds. It goes without saying that the UK energy sector has a hugely influential role to play in the journey to net carbon zero, both in the UK, but also on an international scale. As most of you will know, the UK government has set out some ambitious plans to reach net zero emissions by 2050, with mainly decarbonised power generation by the 2030s. We also know that no single generation technology provides a perfect solution for this, and that makes policy formation very challenging. For example, quite often when energy costs are debated, people talk about wholesale power prices, but according to Ofgem, they only make up about a third of consumers' bills. It's a similar thing in construction space, where a big portion of the cost for building a mega infrastructure project, like a new build nuclear power station, for example, is the cost of finance, and hence government policy in this regard is really influential. The one thing that most people agree on, if not all, is the need to reduce carbon emissions. And to do that, the government has been modelling a huge range of energy mix scenarios for low-cost energy systems. And we can see the results of this in the Energy White Paper, which was published last December. What we learned from this is it's easier to keep energy prices low if we have a high volume of both nuclear and gas with carbon capture, power generation alongside emerging renewable energy. The White Paper also sets out hundreds of millions of funding for small modular nuclear reactors, in addition to aiming for a final investment decision, an acronym referred to as FID, on a nuclear power station before the next election. And this was backed up by a later announcement that the government entered discussions with EDF on the Sizewell C, something we monitor with interest. In June this year, the government announced a cluster sequencing exercise for CCUS deployment. And the point of that is to identify 2 clusters for deployment by the mid-2020s, just a few years away from where we are now, and to define a process for selecting another 2 clusters by 2030. So some really exciting developments in that regard. In August, just a few weeks ago, the government also announced the UK hydrogen strategy, and this included a consultation on plans for a net zero hydrogen fund. The intent of this being to find the best way to support hydrogen-based technologies and get these moving. So what's the point of all these? Well, they're absolutely central to securing economic opportunities for industry, for many of those on this call, and the broader levelling up strategy across the UK, which we all support. So what are some of the key challenges we face as we go forward? Well, to put it into context, we need to quadruple low carbon technology power generation in the UK from where we were just a couple of years ago, really, by the time we get to 2050. So that's a huge challenge. What's more, we need to do this in an environment where existing nuclear power generation is intended to be halved by 2025, again, just a few years away from now. And that's a problem because we also expect electricity demand by 2050 to be a lot higher than it is today. So it goes without saying, this will not be easy. We need to invest more in skills development and education for the next generation of people coming into our sector. And those people will need mentoring, they'll need coaching, they'll need support, they'll need development from those of us working in the energy sector today. And that's absolutely crucial. At the same time, we need to think about the infrastructure we have around buildings and properties, both domestically, industrially, commercially, but also our transport network, so we can harness these opportunities and maximise efficiency of resources. Developments in technology, of course, will be front and central to us being able to realise this ambition, but also striking the right balance between innovation and ambition, but without compromising the importance of safety and security of the national infrastructure. That this will be absolutely key as well. And then we have to ask, how do we make these opportunities attractive to us in the supply chain? Well, we have to develop sustainable procurement models, as James talked to a few moments ago, with fair and appropriate transfer of risk in contracts that encourage and drive and facilitate collaboration, but also incentivise excellent and predictable performance. Another issue, of course, is the availability of investment and funding. Knowing where this is going to come from and when will either accelerate progress or put the brakes on developments. And this is absolutely key to establishing strong levels of confidence in businesses like ours. So in short, our government has to play a key role, governments around the world, a key role in this to allow private investment and for us to commit to realising the challenge. The big question, I guess, is can we hold our nerve? At Gleeds, we certainly intend to. So how do we get there? What are some of the solutions that we are working towards and putting in place today? So energy infrastructure isn't just about mitigating the climate crisis. It also contributes to the national and local good in many, many other ways too. So as Nicola and Michelle alluded to earlier on, they create a lot of opportunities, job opportunities, not to mention apprenticeships, high value employment, academic education. These plants need highly skilled people to design, build, operate and decommission them. It's doubly beneficial because quite often these sites tend to be in relatively remote areas, and this clearly offers huge potential to support levelling up. The nuclear sector, for example, has made a hard commitment to boosting diversity in its workforce by targeting a 40% female workforce by 2030. This is a target that we absolutely support within Gleeds and across the industry as a principle, but it's proving to be a huge challenge for all of us. The long-term nature of these energy projects also presents a great opportunity for all of us to invest. It's not just about construction methods and plan, it also encompasses better use of digital technology and data analytics, as James spoke about before. For our part here at Gleeds, we are looking to invest in better ways of gathering and analysing cost information to make better decisions earlier in the project lifecycle at the earliest possible point. This enables all of us to focus on value add in what we do in our collective push towards this net carbon zero economy. But this comes back again to the importance of us making best use of our collective resources. And in this case, it's about huge opportunities for the next generation coming into our sector to embrace ways of doing things differently and more efficiently and really, just doing things better. So thank you for listening, folks. I'll now hand over to Paul, who will talk about rail. Over to you, Paul.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Andy. Morning, everyone. I'm Paul Robinson. I look after the rail team. Now, this section is to consider how we can all tackle the shared challenges facing us all from a rail perspective. Listen, we can all agree that transportation and rail investment is a demonstrable contributor to creating social and economic growth, creating greater opportunities for us all, and contributing to tackling the carbon and climate emergency by creating a low carbon form of transport. But how can rail investment enable us to tackle the shared challenges that are here now? The issues are here now, They're growing and they will not solve themselves without coordinated effort from us all. Now, what we need is a long-term, integrated and complementary rail investment plan, obviously linked to other forms of transportation such as highways, aviation, ports. But by doing this and really getting cross-party long-term commitment, this will allow us all to tackle the current and growing skills gap by investing in things like apprentices, graduates, creating diverse opportunities for all, and STEM programs within schools as an example. It gives us this long-term view, it gives us the opportunity to create greater value in delivery. It allows us to incentivize and create more efficient and sustainable methods of delivery and materials and outcomes for all of us. It creates lasting solutions to the carbon crisis by investing in delivery and techniques and outcomes that do and will for the long term reduce carbon. We can also create innovative solutions, and it's only with certainty that we can invest in innovation, such as modern methods of construction, really incentivizing new ways of doing things and not just churning out what we've always done. And something that's important to us all is levelling up the UK, because a real effective transportation network has massive impacts for everybody, and it creates social and economic opportunity for all parts of the UK. However, as you can see by the block on the right, all of these outcomes and benefits are reduced by things such as short-term planning, uncertainty, and changing scope and priorities, because this straight away removes our ability to create focus on value, innovation, and skills, because it creates a short-termism and focus on survival in terms of commercial performance, conflicts, and potentially materials usage. Because if you don't know what's next, how are you incentivized to do the right things? We need long-term plans to incentivize and reward the attainment of value, efficiencies, outcomes, and investment in skills. However, yes, we're not going to lie, there are headwinds. Passenger numbers within rail are at their lowest numbers since 1872. And the current passenger income is 30% of expected levels. There is funding and governmental uncertainty. Yes, there's COVID crisis that's increased the national debt and available funding. However, at this point, we need certainty and actions, not sound bites. There's a continuing delay to the integrated rail plan. How this links things like the control period investment in Network Rail, the Northern Powerhouse Rail project, HS2, the highways investment, and we're all awaiting the latest comprehensive spending review and whatever that's going to bring to us. What we need to do is incentivize innovation, value, outcomes, and trust ourselves as an integrated supply chain, client body, and consultants, contractors to meet the challenge. Material and labour costs, they are soaring, as Nicola said earlier. Labour's more scarce with more opportunity. There's never been more jobs out there for people, but there's such a lack of available skills. This means advanced planning is more important to all of us. There is a risk of delivery focus being lost within Network Rail at the moment, and the focus being applied to the change created by the Great British Railway Initiative. But what does it really mean for us all? Is it a change that's going to distract? Yes, there are long-term benefits, but what's going to happen in the meantime? And there is an inability for us all to invest in early years professionals if we have order book uncertainty. And it's very clear to us all, projects do not get cheaper with time. We need to get moving with them on a long-term and integrated plan. The problems are still here now in carbon, skills, climate, economic imbalance, and the challenges need to be solved, and they're not going to get better with time without us doing anything. So collectively, we need to hold our nerve to impact the current issues with skills, climate, efficient delivery, innovation, and focusing on long-term passenger and economic benefits for all of us. And the enabler to this is a long-term, consistent and integrated transport strategy that we can all buy into and deliver with certainty and realise the benefits for all of us in the UK. Thanks for listening. I'm going to hand you back now to Dean to sum up.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Thank you to all of the panelists. who've really described the complexity of the current situation we find across the energy and infrastructure sector. And, you know, in spite of having to solve those counteracting items, there is a volume of work in front of us that we need to ride the crest of the wave. We need to hold our nerve. It's the right thing to do. And irrespective of what position we hold in the industry, we've got to work together to come up with the right sustainable solutions. All of these items, if we work together, we can resolve very quickly. What we're going to do now is put up the second poll on the screen. So if you could answer that poll, it would be really good. I'll talk to you about the outcome when we finish the Q&A session. We have collated during the course. Thank you for some the questions that have come through. I'm now going to ask the panel some of the questions that we've collated through the Q&A function and some of the interactions. If your question doesn't get answered or asked during this live session, we will come back to you after the webinar and answer the questions for you. So, look, Q&A. First question really to you, Paul, is from Laura of BIA, who has asked what you said sounds great, but do you think that this approach could be seen as a little naive given all of the current challenges we face at the moment? How can we demand a long-term plan with so much uncertainty around?
Well, straight back up again, Dean. That's a good challenging question to start with, and it probably necessitates a challenging response, I'd suggest. Yes, it could be seen as naive, but I think my challenge back to that approach is we need to change the status quo. We can't keep doing what we've always done over the years, which is flip-flopping between policies and investments and what scope's delivered within each project. We need to really challenge how things have been done and change, because the problems are there now and they're not going away. It's this climate, skills, economic inequality, and the affordability of projects. They're not getting cheaper. So we need to work together to really and go for a real long-term investment plan across Parliament that everyone's going to commit to. We know what we're doing, because only by doing that we can create focus on what needs to be done, instead of focus on constantly rescoping, repricing and reapproving projects, which only creates inefficiency and lack of focus on delivery. Brilliant,
thank you, Paul. Michelle, a question from you, from one of our grads, George, one of the Gleeds grads. You touched on our work in Peru. What George is wondering is, how do you really deliver sustainable infrastructure on a national level, a national scale?
So the reconstruction of Peru is a government-to-government contract, and we're working in partnership with our clients, the UK and Peruvian governments. And it's all about bringing the best skills to the table. So whether that's skills in infrastructure or sustainability, digital data, procurement, etc. A large element of the Peru project is really about knowledge transfer, so making sure that the Peruvians are equipped with the skills to adapt to mitigate against climate change in the future themselves, long after the project is finished. I think the part for me is, if you can get the investment piece right, if you can get the procurement route right, if you can get the skills, the supply chain right, then you can make a real difference on the ground in both the short and the long term.
Brilliant, thank you, Michelle. James, a question for you. During your section, you mentioned that one of the solutions is to enable better delivery is through digital and data. Could you give me some examples of how data can help improve delivery, please?
Yeah, sure. Another really good question. So I think to start with, in this industry, we're not very good at collecting our data, but we should be, because we generate an enormous volume. If you think, you know, projects that we deal with them in terms of years or even decades in infrastructure projects, and out of that, there's a huge amount of data in all various aspects. So we're not very good at capturing it, but we are very good actually at bringing people together You know, we bring people from all walks of life together to create a project, to build a road, to, you know, build a building, whatever it may be, and then they go their separate ways. So the talent's there and the innovation's there, but we just need to get better at collecting the data. And the reason behind that is, I think, is people can start seeing the data's used to make improve the position of projects. They'll more gladly give that data. Then I think once you've got the data, it's a bit of a two-pronged approach. There's using the data and then using things like project data analytics and machine learning in the project itself to reduce risk, reduce program, reduce cost, all those good things to actually get a better product. But then the other prong is actually using big data and AI for things like train delay prediction, making sure, are we building the right things in the first place? And this all goes back to, you know, the question of sustainable infrastructure. Are we building things that we really need? And then using the resource that we have, which, as you know, we talked about, is limited. Are we using that resource in the right place to reduce waste and inefficiencies? So I think data, you know, using data properly is a huge opportunity for our industry. Great,
thank you for that, James. Andy, I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to make this the last question. And if it's okay, I'm going to bring that to you to conclude this great webinar. What do you consider to be the single most important factor in the drive to develop a low carbon energy sector in the UK and ultimately globally?
Thanks, Dean. That's a good question. I was hoping I'd get one. I think for me, it's the importance of investment again. So really, if we are to change our behaviours, if we are to improve trends of the past of suboptimal project performance, we need that investment, and we need to know where it's going to come from. So we need I think the term Paul used was integrated and committed pipeline. We need that to enable the investment in skills and resources, to drive innovation, to really embrace the use of digital tools and data better, to make more informed decisions earlier in the project lifecycle. And by doing that, we'll improve project outcomes, we'll increase efficiency, we'll reduce waste, we'll have a much better chance on this journey to net carbon zero. I think the other term that was used before, again, I think by Paul, to put it bluntly, these projects aren't going to get any cheaper. And if we delay, all we're going to do is push up project costs in the future. Benefits will either be postponed or, worse still, not realised at all. So I think funding and investment and having that commitment and that clarity of where the pipeline is absolutely key. That's for me. Yeah. Back to you, Dean. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andy. Look, what a fabulous webinar this has been for certainly from my position. I hope everyone listening has got the benefit as well. You know, I must thank all the panelists for their time today and their insight. I must thank everybody who's attended the webinar. You know, thank you for forwarding such great questions. As I say, other questions that we haven't answered, we will answer directly to you in the next few days. This is our first webinar. There is a regular series of these being planned, so please look out for the next ones. It seems sensible that looking at the poll, and we'll talk about the poll in a minute, that, you know, there seems to be an agreement across the people attending that these are key issues across our industry. So the webinars going forward will start to focus in on some of these items and how we resolve them. Please also note that the infrastructure market report is out on Wednesday, next Wednesday, the 15th of September. And as attendees of this webinar, you will get an advanced copy of that market report. So thank you to Nicola for collating that, and we look forward to sending that out to you. And more importantly, we look forward to your feedback on how you see that. In addition to that, Gleeds don't just focus on the infrastructure and energy sector. We do a lot of insight and analytics across all of our market sectors. So please engage through our website. There's lots and lots of stuff going on a regular basis that looks across the whole of the built environment. So just to conclude, you know, the poll, I'm really pleased to see that actually there's a fairly even spread of responses on where we see the importance of these items that we've identified. But it's really interesting that you know, government commitment is seen as the leading requirement. And my sense, when you look at some of the announcements that have come from the big governments around the world, is we have that commitment at the moment. You know, the key to it, in our view, is the second most popular point, which is to deliver this, we've got to collaborate. We've got to work together as an industry to deliver this great opportunity, this great amount of work we have globally to deliver the benefits going forward. And, you know, if we can do that, we can then start to plan for the long term to integrate and really bring that forward, develop the skills gap or close the skills gap, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, actually, if we get that, we can then invest as commercial entities to the greater good to help that sustainability agenda, you know, help the recovery agenda, and help, you know, build sustainable communities going forward. So, you know, that's really heartening for me to see that poll, you know, the people on this this webinar really are kind of in the same swim lane, which is great. So look, that's it. We're a minute too early, which is great. Thank you for attending. It's great seeing you all, and speak soon. Thank you and goodbye.